Welcome to the lecture for Basics of Biblical Hebrew, Chapter 30, the Hiphil stem. Now, the Hiphil stem is the causative action with an active voice. Now, this is the first time we've encountered causative action. Remember, the Kal stem is simple action. The Pil and Pual stem is intensive type of action. And the Hiphil and the Hofal is causative action, where someone causes something to be done. Causative action. Let's look at our screens and see what type of causative action the Hiphil stem communicates. Number one, the causative action or the causative types of action with an active voice. Look at the example here. In the Kal stem, the verb zakar translates he remembered. But in the Hiphil stem, hizkir, the translation is he caused someone to remember or he reminded. You can see in the translation, cause to remember or remind, that there is a causative nuance in the translation. That's why we call it the causative stem. Someone is causing something to happen. It's not just simply he remembered, but he caused someone else to remember, or he reminded somebody. Now that's the basic and most important meaning associated with the Hiphil stem, but there are a few others we need to consider as well. Let's go back to our screens. Number two, simple action. Oftentimes, the Hiphil stem will preserve the simple action of the Kal. For example, in the Kal stem, the verb shakam simply means he arose early. But in the Hiphil stem, hishkim, it also means he arose early. There's no apparent change in translation. Now, this occurs less often than the normal causative nuance, but you need to be aware of it. And I've mentioned this with all the other stems too. Sometimes the verbs in the Nifal stem translate as active forms. Sometimes verbs in the Pil stem translate as non-intensive, simple action forms. Well, likewise, sometimes in the Hiphil stem, these verbs will translate as simple Kals. The way you check this is either A, memorizing them in your vocabulary as such, or B, when you encounter a verb you haven't seen before, you look it up in the lexicon. Those are your two options. Let's go back to your screen and look at the second set of two possibilities, 3 and 4. Declarative. In the declarative nuance, the subject of the verb declares someone or something to be in a certain condition or state of being. Look at the example. In the Kal, the verb rasha translates he was guilty. In the Hiphil stem, hirshia, the translation is he declared something or someone guilty. Now that's why we call it the declarative nuance or the declarative use of the Hiphil stem, because someone is declaring someone or something to be in a particular state. You can see we've added the key word declared in the translation. And the fourth option is factative. When a Hiphil verb indicates the factative nuance, like the Pil stem, it makes an intransitive Kal verb into a transitive verb. That is, a verb that can't take a direct object into a verb that does take a direct object. Look at the example. In the Kal, the verb gadal translates he was great. Translates he was great. In the Hiphil, higdil, the translation is he made someone great. He made someone great. So now you're having a verb that once couldn't take a direct object, but now it can take a direct object. The intransitive has become transitive. So those are the four basic uses of the Hiphil, the causative stem. There's the regular causative nuance, there's the simple nuance, the declarative, and the factative. It's good that you have those four items memorized and associated with the Hiphil stem, so that when you encounter a Hiphil verb that you don't know, you haven't seen before, you can perhaps try your four options to see which one best suits the context if you don't have access to a lexicon. Let's now look at the 10 most common verbs in the Hiphil stem. The 10 most common verbs in the Hiphil stem. Look at your screen. One of the first things that you'll recognize in comparison to the Pual stem is the Hiphil stem occurs frequently. In fact, after the Kal stem, the Hiphil stem is number 2 in terms of frequency of occurrence in the Hebrew Bible. So the Hiphil stem is very important. Look at some of the examples here with me. Look at the first one, bo, the most common verb in the Hiphil stem. In the Kal, it means to go in, enter, or come to. In the Hiphil, it means to bring in or come in. Now look at the difference here. To go in is the normal translation for the Kal, but in the Hiphil, it means to bring in or to cause something to come in. It's the causative nuance, the causative nuance. But look at number 2, the verb nakah, to strike, smite, beat, strike dead, destroy, injure. It's kind of a mean verb. But look here. This particular verbal stem maintains the Kal translation or the simple action. It doesn't have a causative nuance associated with it. It's the simple action of the cal stem in this particular verb. Let's look at example number 3, shuv. In the cal, it means to turn back, return, or go back. But in the hiphil now, it means cause to return, or cause to bring back, or cause to give back. The causative nuance is maintained in all the different translations in the hiphil. Let's look at verb number 5, yatzah. A very common verb in the Hebrew Bible, yatzah. In the cal stem, it means to go out, to go forth. But in the hiphil stem, to cause to go out or to bring forth. Again, you can see the causative nuance in the translations that appear in the listing. That's how the hiphil stem works. The hiphil stem indicates causative action, active voice. Causative action, active voice. Later we'll go to the hofal, which is related to the hiphil. It's going to have causative action, but a passive voice. So the hiphil and hofal indicate causative action, but hiphil is active in voice, hofal is passive in voice. In this chapter, hiphil, strong. Now that we know what the hiphil means, causative, active, we want to talk about what the hiphil looks like. How do you identify a hiphil verb in context? Look at your screen with me. On this screen, you'll see the hiphil perfect strong verb. Hiphil perfect strong verb. And if you look on the left side of your screen in the box, you will see the hiphil perfect strong verb diagnostics highlighted in red. And there are 2 examples there. The first example is hiktil. Hiktil. That's the hiphil perfect 3ms. Then you have your second example, hiktalta. That's the hiphil perfect 2ms. You'll notice that in both forms, you have a he hiric prefix. That's the he of the hiphil stem. Recall that the nifal stem prefixes a noon to make the verb nifal. That's why we call it nifal. Notice the noon or the n in the pronunciation of the word. In the hiphil, the spelling of the stem, hiphil, begins with an H or a he. That H or he is what we prefix to a hiphil verb to make it hiphil. We could think of this as the H stem, if you will, the H stem. Now, you have two examples because you have 2 different stem vowels in the hiphil perfect. You have either the hiric yod stem vowel in the first example or the pathic stem vowel in the second example. If you look at the paradigm of the hiphil on the right side of your screen, you will see the hiric yod or the pathic stem vowel vary. In the first 2 examples, hikdil and hiktilah, you've got the hiric yod stem vowel. But look at the next forms in the 2ms and 2fs, hiktalta and hiktalt. There you have the pathic stem vowel. You go down to the 3cp, hiktilu, and once again the hiric yod stem vowel, and then all the other stem vowels are pathic. So here's what you need to do when it comes to the hiphil perfect. How do you identify a hiphil perfect verb when you see it in context? Very easy. The prefix on the front will be he hiric. The stem vowel will vary between hiric yod and pathic. Now the pathic stem vowel we've seen before, but the hiric yod is quite distinct and unique to the hiphil stem. So that hiric yod stem vowel is going to be really important. The pathic stem vowel is secondarily important. We've already seen pathic stem vowels elsewhere. But with a hiric yod, that stem vowel is unique to the hiphil stem, and so we want to be thinking about the he hiric and the hiric yod for the diagnostic features of the hiphil perfect. Let's go through the paradigm and say it together just so we can emphasize the presence of the he hiric at the beginning and the hiric yod or pathic stem vowel. Here are the forms. Hiktil, hiktilah, hiktalta, hiktalt, hiktalti, hiktilu, hiktaltem, hiktalten, hiktalnu. You will notice in every form the he hiric prefix. You'll also notice that all of the perfect suffirmatives remain unchanged. That is, the cal paradigm that you've memorized on the left exhibits the same perfect suffirmatives that you see in the hiphil paradigm on the right. So there's no need to memorize the hiphil strong verb paradigm for the perfect, because all you need to know is that you have your regular cal paradigm and you add the he hiric to the front to identify it as hiphil. Now there are other spelling changes, but it's that he hiric that's going to set apart the hiphil stem for you. Next we're going to move to the hiphil imperfect. The hiphil imperfect. Look at your screen. On the left side of your screen you're going to see the box for the hiphil imperfect strong verb. and you're going to see two vowels that function as the diagnostic features for the Hiphil imperfect strong verb. Underneath the preformative consonant yod in the box, you'll see a pathic. That pathic preformative vowel is a diagnostic feature of the Hiphil stem. Then once again, you're going to see a Hirik yod stem vowel. That Hirik yod stem vowel is much more common in the imperfect, and it's going to be a very important feature in the remaining conjugations of the Hiphil stem. Now let's look at the Hiphil paradigm on your screen on the right. Yaktil, taktil, taktil, taktili, aktil. Yaktilu, taktelna, taktilu, taktelna, naktil. Very straightforward paradigm. Let's notice the several diagnostic features. Again, number one, there's a pathic under the preformative consonant in every form. Number two, there's a Hirik yod stem vowel in 8 out of the 10 forms. In the twin 3FP and 2FP forms, the stem vowel has changed from Hirik yod to sere. Now this is an important feature to recognize because really I want you to think about Hirik yod and sere as interchangeable for the Hiphil stem. Hirik yod and sere as interchangeable for the Hiphil stem, very important. Let's go back to your screen and look at the Hiphil stem again. Now one of the things you may be asking yourself is this. You told me when it came to the perfect, the diagnostic feature of the Hiphil throughout is that it's this H prefix stem. You prefix a hey to the forms. Well, I don't see a prefixed hey in any form on my screen right now in the Hiphil forms. And that's because the hey of the Hiphil stem has dropped out in every form. You can think of it as a ghost. It was once there, but it dropped out. The hey dropped out in its location. Now, have you seen that happen before? Have you seen the hey drop out in forms? You bet. In fact, I want to show you, I want to demonstrate for you what you already know, and I want you to then to apply it to what we know now for the Hiphil stem. Let's look at my screen here. You see on your screen a combination of the bait preposition followed by the definite article in red, and all of that's prefixed to the noun yom. Ba-ha-yom. Ba-ha-yom. The preposition bait, the definite article, followed by the noun yom. You see 3 features there. But you learned back in our noun chapters that this form actually does not occur. That the hey in this particular form is going to drop out, and the bait is going to slide over and occupy the space the hey once took. So I'm going to make that happen here. I'm going to erase my hey, and I'm going to erase this bait, and I'm going to slide now the bait over. And you'll see now, like the bottom form, the form that you're accustomed to seeing in the Hebrew Bible. The hey is gone, but the pointing of the definite article remains. So you can see now in both the top and the bottom forms, which are identical, you see the bait of the prepositional prefix, you see the pathic and dagesh forte of the definite article, and then the noun yom in black. The hey is dropped out, but the pointing features are the same. Well, let's look at this next example here. What happens in this particular form? Here we go. You can see at the very beginning of the word a yod prefix. That yod is the imperfect preformative for the 3ms. It's in blue. It's followed by a hey pathic prefix. A hey pathic prefix. That's the prefix of the Hiphil stem. See, I told you the hey is prefixed. Then you can also see the Hirik yod stem vowel that's also diagnostic of the Hiphil stem. Now, just like the noun construction we saw with bait, the definite article, and the noun, the hey in this particular construction is also going to disappear. And because of that, the yod is going to slide over and take its place. So you have the yod of the imperfect preformative, you have the pathic of the hey prefix, and then the rest of the verb maintains itself. So the hey has dropped out. The hey has dropped out. Now, that's just one of the peculiar features about the Hebrew language we need to get used to. That the hey in certain environments will drop out. It's very weak. You've seen the hey at the end of a word drop out. You've also seen the hey at the end of a word strengthen to a tau. You've also seen a hey in the middle of a word drop out and consonants slide together and vowels are maintained and stuff like that. Well, that's the exact same thing that happens here. Now look at your screen again, the previous screen that we had with the Hiphil strong verb diagnostics. Even though the hey prefix of the Hiphil stem is gone, the remnants of it appear in the pointing. And the pathic under the preformative consonant will remind you of the Hiphil stem every time. The pathic under the preformative consonant is the diagnostic feature of the Hiphil imperfect, including or following in addition to the stem vowel hieric yod or sere. Once you know those particular diagnostic features, identification of the Hiphil imperfect is relatively easy. Having covered the perfect and the imperfect, let's move to the imperative. Look at your screen. The Hiphil strong imperative. You'll see in the box on the left of your screen the Hiphil imperative strong verb diagnostics. And once again, there are two forms. The first form, haktail. You see the he pathic prefix, diagnostic of the Hiphil stem, and the sere stem vowel that you're coming to learn is diagnostic for the Hiphil stem as well. In the second example, haktili, you also see the he pathic prefix that identifies the Hiphil stem, and then the hieric yod stem vowel. If you look at the Hiphil paradigm of the imperative on the right side of your screen, haktail, haktili, haktilu, haktailna, you'll see every form is identified with a he pathic prefix. That he pathic prefix is the key to identifying the Hiphil stem. You'll also see that the stem vowel is variable, just like the imperfect, between hieric yod and sere. It's sere in the 2ms and the 2fp, but hieric yod in the 2fs and the 2mp. As long as you understand that the stem vowel is variable. In the perfect, the stem vowel is variable between hieric yod and pathic. In every other conjugation in the Hiphil stem, the stem vowel will be variable between hieric yod and sere. Hieric yod and sere. So keep those two related, hieric yod and sere, and you'll be good to go for identifying all of the Hiphil stem vowels as we progress. Now let's move to the infinitive construct and infinitive absolute in the Hiphil stem. Look at your screen. Here we have listed on your screen the two infinitives of the Hiphil stem. In the left box, the Hiphil infinitive construct, haktil. In the right box, the Hiphil infinitive absolute, haktail. Both forms, both infinitives, exhibit the he pathic that is diagnostic of the Hiphil stem, and the stem vowel is variable. The infinitive construct maintains the hieric yod stem vowel. The infinitive absolute maintains the sere stem vowel, the sere stem vowel. Now, because you already know that the Hiphil stem has a stem vowel that's variable between hieric yod and sere, this particular form shouldn't give you too much trouble. You'll just have to memorize that the infinitive absolute has the E-class vowel sere, and the infinitive construct has the I-class vowel hieric yod. But again, when it comes to identifying the Hiphil infinitive construct or any infinitive construct in the Hebrew Bible, more than 9 out of 10 times it's going to be the object of a preposition or following a preposition, and so it's going to be very easy to identify the Hiphil infinitive construct. Finally, we're going to move to our Hiphil participle, the Hiphil strong verb participle. Look at your screen with me. On the left side of your screen, you'll see the strong verb diagnostics for the Hiphil participle in the box. The form is pronounced maktil, maktil. You will see at the very beginning a mem prefix that you're coming to learn is diagnostic of the participle conjugation or inflection pattern, the mem prefix. You'll also see the pathic vowel underneath the mem prefix. Now, like the imperfect, the he of the Hiphil stem has dropped out, and the mem of the participle prefix has slid over and occupied the spot that the he formerly occupied. Then you have the hieric yod stem vowel. So in the imperfect and in the participle, the he has dropped out. In all of the other conjugations of the Hiphil stem, the he of the Hiphil is present. In the perfect, it's he hieric. In all of the others, it's he pathic. It's that pathic under the participle prefix that will distinguish this form as Hiphil, in addition to the hieric yod stem vowel. So let's look at the forms. Maktil, makteleth, maktilim, maktiloth. The mem pathic prefix is diagnostic of the Hiphil participle, and once again you have a hieric yod stem vowel in all the forms except the feminine singular, because it takes that segulate pattern with the T or the tau of the feminine singular inflectional ending. But pretty easy to identify, pretty easy to identify. By way of review, let's look at our screens and observe once again the participle prefix in the derived stems. In the PL, the PUAL, the Hiphil, the HOFAL, and the HITHPAEL, the participle is marked by a distinctive M prefix or mem prefix. Recognizing that mem or m prefix on the participle is key or diagnostic to successful identification of the participle in Hebrew. We can now move to our summary of the Hiphil strong verb diagnostics. Look at your screen. Of everything you've encountered so far in this chapter, this particular screen represents the most important information in the chapter in terms of identifying Hiphil stem verbs. You must memorize the forms on your screen, especially the features marked in red, because those features marked in red identify, mark, are diagnostic for, help you to figure out that these verbs are Hiphil verbs. In the perfect, you will see the he, heric prefix, followed by the heric yod or pathic stem vowel. In the imperfect and participle, you will see the pathic under the imperfect preformative or the participle prefix, followed by the heric yod stem vowel, also interchangeable with sere. In the imperative, the infinitive construct, and the infinitive absolute, the he pathic prefix marks these forms as Hiphil, and then the stem vowel is a variable between heric yod and sere. Meaning this: once you memorize the forms you see on the screen, the diagnostic features, identification of the Hiphil stem is pretty easy. The diagnostic features are bold and distinct. Bold and distinct. And so once you master them, finding a form in the context in the Hebrew Bible and identifying it as Hiphil shouldn't be too much trouble. Now here's the good news. You don't have to memorize the entire Hiphil perfect paradigm, the entire Hiphil imperfect paradigm, the entire Hiphil participle paradigm. You already know the preformatives, the subformatives, and the inflectional endings that will occur on those forms because you've memorized, like a robot, the cal stem, all of the strong verbs. Once you've memorized the cal stem and all of the strong verbs, we take an approach of diagnostic features for the derived stem verbs. No paradigm memorization, diagnostic feature memorization. What makes a nifal verb? That noon heric prefix. What makes a PL verb, or a pual verb? Well, for sure the dogish forte in the second root letter, the pathic or the kibbutz under the first root letter, and any shawa under a prefix or preformative. Well, what makes a Hiphil verb? It's that he prefix in every form. Now, in the imperfect and the participle, it slides out. That's fine. There's enough left for you to figure out that that's the Hiphil verb with that pathic preformative vowel or pathic prefix vowel. Then just master the heric yod or sere stem vowels, and you'll be good to go for identifying the Hiphil stem. But before we conclude this chapter, there are some things that we should point out and emphasize so that you don't get confused about forms that are now similar to one another as we continue to build our Hebrew verbal system in all the different forms. Look at your screen. First, we just want to emphasize the importance of the he prefix in the Hiphil stem. In certain conjugations of the Hiphil stem, the he heric and he pathic prefixes are the most important diagnostic features, and it is essential to know in which conjugations each occur. Think of it this way. In the perfect, it's he heric. In the imperative, the infinitive construct, and the infinitive absolute, it's he pathic. Additionally, you know that the he has dropped out in the imperfect and the participle. You must have this feature down, and when it occurs and when it doesn't occur, so that you can master sorting through the Hiphil stems. Next, a point of possible confusion in the imperfect. Look at your screens. You know that Hiphil imperfect verbs now have pathic under the performative, and that's a super important diagnostic feature for the Hiphil stem. However, you also have seen a pathic preformative vowel in one other instance with one guttural type 2 cal imperfect verbs. Look at your screen and you'll see the example ya'amod. Ya'amod. Because there's a guttural in first root position, it prefers that pathic vowel pattern. And so now you have two times or two instances where you're going to have a pathic under the preformative vowel. Either the Hiphil verb or the one guttural type 2 cal imperfect. Well, how do you distinguish between the two verbs when you see one? Very easy. Look at the stem vowel. In the Hiphil, it's heric yod. In the imperfect, for the one guttural, it's going to be holum. Holum. So what you have to do is you begin with the fact that there's a pathic under the preformative vowel, and now you've got to say, oh, is that a one guttural verb? If it is a one guttural verb, then you move to the stem vowel. If it's an O class stem vowel, it's cal. If it's an I or E class stem vowel, it's Hiphil. It's that easy. It's that easy. So it's just important that you kind of get these things in your mind, stare at the page for a while until you have recall of the information so that when you see those forms in context, you can make sense of them. Well, that concludes our study of the hifil stem in the strong verb. Remember this. The most important diagnostic feature in the hifil stem is the hey prefix that occurs on every form. Now you have to remember that the hey prefix will drop out in the imperfect and the participle, but you've seen that feature before in the nouns with the definite article and the prepositions adding together. So it's nothing new that you're learning. You're taking something you already know and applying it to this environment. Additionally, the stem vowel is very important in the hifil stem. In most of the conjugations, it's variable between hieroc yod and sere. In the perfect, it's variable between hieroc yod and pathic. Once you know that, you're ready to move on to the hifil weak verbs.